Hi, my name is Callie, and today in this presentation, we will be going over the nonlinear ways LGBT rights and visibility have progressed in the past century. This will be our guiding question as we go through these slides. How has society perceived differences in performing gender and sexuality? The past decade to today has seen a remarkable increase in those who identify as LGBT. In the US alone, 7.6% of the population identified as such, this being a notable increase from how many identified in 2012 and recently 2020. 1 in 5 Gen Z Americans also identify as LGBT. Regarding transgender identity, almost a percentage of the US identifies as trans, with 11.8% of prior LGBT surveyors also seeing themselves trans. June is Pride Month, a time of celebration and for some protest. The visibility of Pride has always been important, and since the legalization of gay marriage in 2015, there's been ever larger celebrations, often resulting from an ever-growing LGBT population each year. Trans Pride is celebrated also during Pride. One of the most prominent transgender celebrations is on Day of Visibility, always celebrated on March 31st. It came about from wanting a holiday to celebrate history and beauty of being trans, compared to the somber attitude of Trans Day of Mourning, a day dedicated to remembering those persecuted and murdered by transphobia. Throughout both holidays, though, many trans individuals remember prior trans individuals throughout history in the past. In the next slide, we will be examining one prominent period of LGBT rights and gender research, the 1920s of Germany, and the drastically ahead of their time researchers there. Magnus Hirschfeld was a Jewish physician whose research and activism led to profound social changes within a short decade. After a soldier he knew confessed his guilt to him about being gay and his nation's hate of him for being such, the soldier took his life. This left a mark on Magnus, a gay man himself, and he spent that year founding the Institute of Sexual Research, dedicating the building to being a safe space for individuals who did not conform to the cishet laws and climate of Germany. The accomplishments during these years were nothing short of remarkable. In 1930, the first modern gender-affirming surgery was conducted, and as more people went there to be their true selves, the identity of being trans became more commonly known in Germany. In addition, the Institute also housed a lot of research regarding gender-affirming care, and they also spent a lot of their time working towards the legal betterment of the LGBT community. And this took many forms, from helping those who transitioned to have more protection through identity cards, to arguing for the repeal of paragraph 175, a part of the German penal code that forbid and punished gay acts between men. Like said last slide, much of the medical approaches and research were ahead of its time. Many of the same hormone therapy treatments many trans individuals take today were also done then as well. Because not only the policing of gender, but also because despite them being seen as male, but dressing as female, many employers would often discriminate. The Institute sometimes having to step in to help. Many transgender individuals also had close ties to the gay and sapphic community, and that also spent there. It was not uncommon for transgender women to help with gay rights organizing, and some had their own papers or clubs that were somewhat spread throughout the public in terms of visibility. Many Germans during the 1920s realized that their country was in the midst of a sexual revolution, and many had strong opinions on that. While 1920s Germany saw many progressive acts and thoughts, such as the decriminalization of sex work and also the introduction of discourse about there being more than one gender, this third gender being known as the sexual intermediary. However, on the other side, many were not happy with this increasingly liberal view. It's no surprise this year, the year that the Institute for Sexual Research was founded, 1919, was the same year the Nazi Party was formed. Over time, as the end of the 20s and early 30s occurred, and the Nazis were able to consolidate more power, they began to harass and terrorize the Institute. On May 6, 1933, members of a Nazi youth group broke inside the Institute in broad daylight, grabbing a large amount of books and research and burning it. It's not an understatement to say how much this set back years and years of research on gender and sexual identity. It's not uncommon during the second half of the 1900s for LGBT identity to be invalidated or seen as a mental disability. Several notable cases are a court arguing a trans woman who legally lived as a woman for 20 years was defined by her chromosomes. In 1999 and 1993, there was research into whether gender dysphoria in cis boys was a result of them being too pretty or feminine. The goal, very similar to research on homosexuality at the time, was to cure rather than to understand. There has been much growth made by the LGBT community in the past 3 decades, both in terms of visibility, but rights earned too. Even more so, the transgender identity, often forgotten several times throughout other LGBT movements, has made remarkable inroads with visibility and acceptance. According to the Pew Research Center, despite the small percentage of trans Americans, 4 out of 10 Americans say they personally know someone who's transgender. Despite all this great progress, we have seen in the past 10 years also a rise in far-right ideology again, notably the resurgence of fascism in public life. It's not hard to see many parallels in today. Looking at recent conservative blueprints, such as Project 2025, the denial of visibility and restriction of public spaces for LGBT individuals is a major goal. The attention is clear when books are pulled from bookshelves and research is slashed. More so, just like how the Nazis would present Magnus and the Institute's LGBT identity as un-German and Jewish, an intersectional view of many of recent statements and actions by Trump and the Republicans show that homophobia and transphobia is very often laced with misogyny and racism. So for the empathy part of the assignment, why does this matter specifically so much to me? LGBT visibility and expression are really important for public perception, but more importantly, it helps gay, bi, trans, NB, pan, and many more individuals feel seen and heard. I've had to come out twice, one time being bi and the other trans. And both times as I wrestled with my identity, I felt like I was losing my mind. It also didn't help that this was the 2000s to early 2010s, where I had limited knowledge of LGBT terms and individuals. As I began to discover more stories and people that were also LGBT, I felt less crazy. Like I wasn't the only one dealing with this very specific struggle, this identity struggle. I learned that there is an identity to this, many people to be friends with and understand. And while it can be difficult at first, it can be really beautiful and unifying. So despite many of the difficulties today with the rise of the far right and restricting laws, I believe we also owe it to future generations and ourselves to promote stories and lives to help other LGBT folk understand the love and importance their identity deserves, and to keep fighting regardless of when history is progressive or aggressive against the LGBT identity. My concluding questions for the class would be this then. Do you know of any other groups, movements that also felt rapid growth in popularity or hate? What are your thoughts on the progress and regress throughout history of some groups, of the ups and downs rather than continual progress? And the next couple of slides are just my bibliography. Thank you for listening. Have a good day.